All right. Welcome, Jared. And my name is Thomas. And this is Real Headlines, where we're going to take real estate news and kind of explain it from our end. My name is Thomas Miner. I'm an agent with the Expert Realty North Star office. Jared, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Jared Nicolaisen with Key Mortgage Group out in Urbandale, and excited to chat with you today, Thomas. We got some good ones today.
Not real estate news specifically, but how have you been enjoying the weather so far?
It's been good, but it's gonna get crappy tomorrow. So, yeah, it's always, we're just getting teased a little bit.
Yeah, it sounds like there's going to be a lot of rain.
Yeah,
So we'll pop right into article number one that we found, and I'm gonna towards the end of this, I'm gonna post the articles in the comment section so everyone can read them after we're done talking about it too. But this first article was from Business Insider, and it says everyone knew the Fed rate was going to raise interest rates last week. Now no one knows what's coming next. I wanted to bring this up because a lot of people will reach out to me whenever an article about the Fed raising interest rates comes up, because a lot of people think this is directly tied to mortgage interest rates. And I wanted to talk to you, Jared, about how that may not necessarily be the truth.
right. Yep. So, I mean, basically, what our interest rates are based off of is your mortgage-backed security, your 30-year mortgage-backed securities, and inflation. So right now, well, during COVID, what the government was doing was buying a bunch of mortgage-backed securities to keep rates low. So that was what they were doing to keep rates low. They've tapered off of that, and now we're starting to see inflation as well. Inflation is, if inflation's at 7% and people are lending at 5%, eventually you get caught up and you're, losing technically 2% of, um, of profit that you could be making. So the
So,
biggest thing right now is we're seeing is high inflation, which is why we're seeing rates go up higher. And just over the weekend, inflation even got higher with gas prices going back up. So we're seeing higher rates just even throughout the weekend. When the Fed actually announced that they were raising the rates, the MBS 30-year actually got improved. So rates were better the 2 days after they announced it.
okay. So, and then when the Fed raises their rates, what kind of loans does that actually affect?
Yep. So that's your savings accounts, that's your car loans. And if someone is doing an in house like portfolio loan for a mortgage, they do trend off of that. Um, Otherwise, it's going to be more of your personal lines than it is your mortgages.
Okay. And then, so other than just bugging you every day, is there any way like a typical just consumer could keep track of what interest rates are doing?
Yeah. So the way that I use a tool that basically tracks it daily, but you can look at the 30 the you it's called the MBS 30-year, and that's essentially a mortgage-backed security bond. And the higher the number, so 100 is a bit essentially their par. Anything under is going to be um, higher rates, and anything above 100 is going to be lower rates. So that's one way to track it. Thomas, I can try to see if I can find it and share my screen just so you can see what the trend line looks like.
Yeah, if you want to pop that up, we can
I'll see if I can find it.
give it a few seconds. Anyone that's watching right now, leave questions and comments below. We would love to end this episode by answering any questions you would have about real estate, loans, lending, anything like that that you can think of. And yeah, it's kind of interesting too, because like I just think in general, people one, they see these articles come out and think the interest rates are going to be immediately affected when in most cases, honestly, it's already kind of preemptively happened. Like a lot of the banks and everything like that kind of anticipate news like this already.
See if there's a good one. Okay, maybe. Mm. All right, here we go. Cool. So,
You know,
um,
you know
I'll
how
sh-
to share.
yeah, I'll share my screen. That's what I want. Okay. Let me know when you can see it.
I can see it now.
Quick. Okay. So now you're looking at, this is the MBS 30-year. You can go, I just set it from 5 years, so you can kind of see, the higher the number, the better the rates are going to be. So right before 2019, they got really low. And then as you can see, once we hit 2020, this is when you get and sorry, it's kind of tracking, but you can kind of
no, it's live. Yeah.
where it was over once, the 105. I mean, that's when rates were at your 2.5, your 2.75, and we sat there for quite a while. And then, as of recently, you can just see the major drop off we've seen, and that's as, the last.
Well, and I can tell you what, like the good thing to kind of see here too, like there's not a huge extreme variance in this either. It's not like, what'd you say? This is the last 5 years?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
here's all of it.
Yeah. So when you go back farther and farther, you could start to see a lot of the variance. But in the last 5 years, it's not like rates have been crazy all over the place,
Right.
So
Yeah, no, and that's the nice thing is generally when you're looking at interest rates, they've been hovering around the 4s.
yeah.
So, and that's in the sign of a healthy market. Granted, are we in a healthy market right now? Not necessarily, but we got spoiled with the 2.5s into the low 3s.
Yeah, I think
We're in the middle.
it's hard for people to get a grasp on it, but 4 in the grand scheme of things, when you compare it to like the last 20 years, is a really good rate.
Yeah.
It's just not as good as when we were in like 2.75.
So, yeah. And when we were at that low of rate, we were in the middle of a pandemic. The world was essentially shut down. So that's not a good thing. I mean, like the individual consumer got spoiled with the low rates, but the economy was not great as overall.
Right. So we'll go to the next article. And this article was an article that I found that was just talking about real estate predictions in general. They said home price appreciation will normalize. That's what 5 economists said, and real estate pros that predict what will happen basically at home prices 2022. And what they're predicting is it's going to shift back to more of what they quote unquote call like a normal appreciation. So right around 3 to 4% rise is kind of what they're predicting. And I wanted to pull up this article. It's a national article, but I wanted to bring this up to talk about, this is kind of sort of what I'm seeing / thinking for Iowa in general. In general, this article talked about they're foreseeing that there's going to be more sellers coming into the market than there was in both 2020 and 2021. Things are getting more and more normal. People for long enough have seen the prices of their home rise. Eventually, there's just the right price, and you're just basically dying to sell to move into what you think would be a better situation. So they think that's going to encourage sellers to sell. Well, basic supply and demand, if you have more sellers and you still have the same amount of buyers that we have, the market's going to even out a little bit. And it's just, there's no way it's going to continue to rise like it basically was. So, some facts about what they said the previous year that I thought was interesting. On a national level, there was a 19% appreciation according to the Case-Shiller Index, which the Case-Shiller accounts for inflation and everything like that. So even if you take out inflation, a 19% appreciation is just, I mean, that's crazy.
That's a lot. That's a lot.
Yeah. So, and then one of the things I wanted to ask you about and kind of get you looped in talking about this article is they talked about what we were just talking about. They were talking about interest rates rising compared to 2020 and 2021. And they think not only will there be more sellers, but they're expecting a little bit of a buyer decrease. And I kind of wanted to have you answer this as far as your aspect as being a lender in central Iowa. And then I kind of wanted to talk about one of the biggest advantages, I would say, to buying and selling in Iowa. So what have you been seeing buyer wise? Like, what are you looking at application wise? Has it been staying steady, increasing?
Right. Yeah. I mean, for the most part, I mean, people feel that it has been slower just because maybe applications are coming in at the same rate, but it's hard for people to get accepted offers. So that's the challenge that we're seeing a lot of, which hopefully if buyer demand goes down, prices normalize a little bit, but that's interest rates also deter people from wanting to buy, especially when there's high levels of inflation and gas prices takes up a big part of your budget now.
Yeah, and I mean, gas prices are affecting the things we buy as well too. So just cost of living in
Right.
general is going
Yeah.
up, and it's definitely something people are cautious of. And just the more uncertainty there is in general with stuff like that does kind of scare buyers off. It doesn't really seem like there's a ton of lost buyer interest as far as
Mm-mm.
on my end, as far as going out and looking at houses. It seems like there's still the same amount of showing requests coming in. Seems like if it's the right type of first time home buyer home, there's houses still getting multiple offers.
Right.
Um, and I kind of wanted to talk about that in general, because I feel like a lot of people are anticipating some sort of correction to come. Real estate is cyclical; it has its ups, it has its downs. We're bound to have some sort of down eventually. In the long run, real estate always goes up. But I wanted to talk about in general when you look at Iowa, and this is kind of a positive. When you look at Iowa, when there's big appreciation, Iowa is never towards the top of the list as far as states as far as appreciation goes. But generally, when there's depreciation, Iowa's never towards the top of that list either. But for every action, there's an equal opposite reaction when it comes to markets and stuff like that. So that is a positive that I really want to focus and talk about with people with Iowa is if you buy a home in Iowa, because of the advantages we have as far as there's tons of different jobs to get here in Des Moines and stuff like that, buyer demand is typically always here. So if you do need to sell for some reason, it's pretty much always a decent market to sell in, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. That makes sense. I mean, in terms of, let me ask you this, and maybe you don't know this answer right off the top of your head, but obviously right now we're seeing a lot of houses, fly off the shelf. In a regular market, let's call it. How long do you think, if someone were to list their house, would it sit on the market compared to where it's at today?
And more of like your normal quote unquote.
Yep.
It's kind of weird. Like right when I first started, it was more your median days on market was closer to 18 to 20 days, right
Mhm.
around there. But even that was considered a pretty strong seller's market. It's always been, I always look at months of inventory, right? So
Yep.
if we don't get any more homes on the market, this is how many months it would take for us to sell out of our inventory. Resale homes in the Des Moines area is pretty consistently for the last year been at like 1.2 months of inventory.
Wow.
When I first started, it was closer. It was still a seller's market. It was still closer to like 2.3, 2.4.
Wow.
So I would think if it would get more towards neutral, if it would get more towards like your 3.5, your 4, you'd probably be looking at a month, maybe. It just depends on what kind of house you have too, and that's one of those things too. If you're once you get into that position to be a homeowner, one of the big keys is don't defer any maintenance. So that way, when it does come time to sell, you're not scrambling to repair stuff. You're not scrambling to have stuff show ready. You don't have to do a
Right.
bunch of those projects. You can basically just list it. So that way, you're taking less time to get the house listed, getting a bunch of people in there to show it as quickly as possible, and hopefully relieving whatever situation that you're in. If you're in that situation where, well, shoot, I just have to sell quickly, whether it's you got a great job offer and you have to relocate or whatever that ends up being.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's unfortunately something to think about. Not a lot of people plan on moving. But yeah, it's definitely something to think about.
Yeah. 100%. I think that provides some good insight on that transition because what we're seeing isn't really a normal, but it's also not as crazy as everywhere else, which is reassuring.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you hear horror stories from people in other states where it's not 3 or 4 buyers, it's 18, it's 20, and they have an 8-hour open house on Sunday, and that's the only time you can go see on it. I mean, you're seeing way crazier stuff in different states, and
Right.
I'm thankful in Iowa, we're in a strong seller's market, but it's not the sellers type of sellers market where I'm considering stealing the key, so my buyers are the only ones that can look at it.
Right.
So
Yeah. Yeah, that's insane.
so next part is part where we ask for questions. No one's left anything for us question wise, but I'll just ask you, Jared, like, is there anything going on locally or anything going on in the real estate market that you're excited about lately?
Nothing too crazy. I mean, it's always good to see, like, I was just sitting on Zillow the other day, and it's always good to see, like, there's some good homes that are coming on the market. So, that's always exciting for me to see that just because it piques everyone's interest and just keeps this train called the real estate world going.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's kind of crazy as busy as it feels like it's been. Trends typically do see that once the weather gets nicer, once we get out of spring break, the market picks up even more. So I'm kind of excited to see what happens in the next
Heck
few weeks, next few months. So
yeah, it's going to be fun. I'm excited for, as it keeps warming up, more so from a weather standpoint than anything. I'm ready for some warm weather.
yeah, and it wasn't even that bad of a winter around here either. I saw that the Des Moines City Council saved something like $2 million just based on snow removal this year, something like
Wow,
that. Yeah, so but
that's crazy.
I'm gonna leave the articles in the comments so people can read those later at their own time. I'm actually gonna do that right now before I forget. But in general, if anyone has any questions for us, we're basically planning on doing this on Mondays if we have enough news to talk about.
Mhm.
Um, leave them here and we'll answer them on the next episode. Jared, was there anything you wanted to leave us with as well?
No, let's have a great week.
All right. I'll see you later, buddy. Thanks for hopping
Yep.
on.
Yeah, you
Bye.
bet.